And magic is very important in Modi. Demonetization is part of the magic. I think anyone with any kind of training in economics would find it difficult to believe why making it illegal to hold notes of certain kind would improve the performance of the people. I mean, there was some idea that you would catch thieves, catch the people who have fake money. But if you really look through it, you will recognize that people don't hold it in fake, they convert it into property like land and housing very much. So there was a real belief in magic, and the magic is also extended in the pictures of war toys into attack on Pakistan. And actually, we are in this odd position. The country of Gandhi is now going around claiming we actually killed many more people. As if that would have been a tremendously good thing. And I have to say that returning the pilot who fell down, and it was not a victory of the Indian side. And it showed somewhat surprising generosity on the part of the government to send it, because usually it's done at the end of the war. But to convert that into a victory of India somehow, we got somebody, a pilot, who was shot down. We were afraid that he would be tortured and possibly executed. Instead, he was generously released. I mean, there's a kind of magic in saying this is to the glory of the present government. And I'm told that the support of the government dramatically increased after that. Now that is magic. I remember in my college days, or school days really, people would ask who are the great figures, and some people said Gandhiji, and someone said Tagore. And one chap said Fisi Sarkar. That was a magician. Now the idea that you see here is not Gandhi or Tagore, that is Fisi Sarkar. By the way, I mean, I was a great devotee of Fisi Sarkar. I don't want to blame him. But there is magic. There is the love of magic, and that's quite important in the election. And right now, I think resisting magic is as important as almost anything else that's going on. And one of the ways to challenge is to challenge the magic that's being presented. I think the Ayushman healthcare being a universal healthcare is an attempt at a rather extraordinary kind of magical thought, because it doesn't even touch these people. It has got nothing to offer to people who don't have a primary health care. It is something to offer if you need an expensive operation and go to a private hospital and get paid. Yeah. I said that in a speech rather like this, I think. And then I think the head of the Ayushman has said Amartya Sen doesn't understand it. He doesn't understand because our plan is not only to do this, but also to do the other. Now here we run into a major thought, and I'm afraid it applies even to my concern about spending so much money on cash rather than healthcare and education. A poor in India does not know where to go when your child has illness. Ayushman is not going to help you. Ayushman would help you if you have lived long time, and then you have an expensive operation which a private hospital will provide for you, and then you take the bill and ask the government to pay. That does nothing for the girl with the empty stomach. I think we have to turn our picture to needs and work and to the freedom of speech, because as I was trying to say, freedom of speech is central to all these things. We won't talk about works and needs. We will talk only about Ayushman Bharat and not about what happened to basic health care and so on, if freedom of speech is interrupted and harshly dealt with. I repeat again by saying it's not the case that these problems didn't exist earlier, but these problems have become dramatically more important recently. I think the Song of Creation, Mandal 10, asks the question, does God exist? How do we know? And if God existed, and if he's still alive, would he remember all that? How does he remember? And so on. That is Rig Veda. It's also the first discussion in Rig Veda about gambling and the dilemma of the gambler who are irresistibly drawn to it, what the Greeks would call weakness of the will, and discussed a lot of it. It was discussed in the Vedas quite brilliantly. But instead of that, it will say that, and mathematics happened dramatically in India from Aryabhata onward, largely, and we have to accept that after the impulse came from influence of Babylon and Greece. That made a big difference, a dramatic difference. And then, of course, the Arabs were the great exponents of Indian mathematics. And so there was this, all this was going on, not to understand that and to think of India as a kind of self-made creature, germinating like a gram on the ground alone.
Like a Swayam Siddh.
That's magic. And I think we have to get rid of not only the bias, but also magic. Thank you.
One of the things which actually surprises me is that the kind of support that this kind of magic or this kind of fascism commands among the educated middle classes in India. That's quite remarkable, because many of them, I'm not talking about universities like mine and so on, where there is a lot of protest, but I think large numbers of people are actually taken in by this and were great supporters of Modi, particularly the educated people, which is quite surprising. We are beginning to have a kind of peasant assertion in which I see a lot of hope. I mean, I think the more the discourse shifts away from Hindutva and Pakistan and so on towards issues of peasant conditions of life, towards issues of unemployment and so on, the more, in fact, people would begin to assert themselves in the elections and thereafter as citizens. But the more they actually start talking about Hindutva and Pakistan, the more they become victims of the magic that Professor Sen was talking about. On this magic, I just want to recollect an occasion that, you see, after demonetization, everybody had great difficulties because you had absolutely no cash, and so you went and queued up. You got up at 4 o'clock in the morning to go and queue up outside the banks and so on. And it was extremely inconvenient. And people simply could not believe that anything as distressing as this could be inflicted upon them without very good reasons. The more you faced hardships, the more you thought, what a wonderful government we have. They don't actually show any fear in inflicting this hardship on me. And that just shows how committed they are to the good of the country. So that's the kind of magic, that you do something pretty ruthlessly, shock and awe. And as a result, the more you kind of, put shock and awe into people, for a while, obviously, because now that has worn off, but for a while, it actually can have this kind of magical impact that Professor Sen was talking about.
Magic is so essential to fascism, and how Hitler also used notions of mysticism, the great Nordic person who was of a superior race should rule the world, and talking about a past which did not exist, hinting at a future which would never be, and inciting people to create the other and the violence. It was all about exclusion. So what's at stake really here in this election is that what approach do we choose in India? The politics of inclusion or the politics of exclusion? And what do you feel that can this magic that is associated with the present ruling party, you know, the kind of clothes the Prime Minister wears with the turbans and all of that, the kind of slogans he uses, the kind of campaigns that are run, are so full of symbolic aesthetics which are so full of blood and orange. And how is it going to play out? And what really is at stake then? And what should India be doing now?